up and final power up of 2022. Our topic today, best practices in staffing. Now, this is really where resource workforce management really come together is that I've got to assign people to the important work that we have to do for our customers or clients. And so we're going to share some hopefully helpful best practice information about that with all of you today. I want to say a special thanks to our three sponsors, Cantata, Projector, and Saviam, all three who build a robust capabilities to help automate resource management amongst other things. And we're delighted to have them support us in this important broadcast today. For those of you wondering too, I won't take any questions during the broadcast until the end, but we will take time for a Q&A at the end. And there is a Q&A panel that you can see that allow you to enter some questions, and we'll try to address those as best we can at the end of our broadcast. So again, welcome. So let me go ahead and I'll go ahead and get us started here. For those of you not familiar with the Resource Management Institute, we are dedicated to the advancement of resource and workforce management thought leadership and on all those things that might mean, including our best practice definition and development that's embodied in our RMCP training as a certification training program. We've got some great market research. We just published our 21st research report on resource and workforce management, and we've got a great library of white papers. Hope if you haven't, you'll check those out. We've got a robust set of education for people that are mission with resource and workforce management in your businesses, and we run a variety of events, and I'll give you quick highlights on some of those that are coming up for us in 2023. So I'm going to dive right into RMI perspectives on best practices in staffing, and I'm going to do that from this one page, which is, by the way, an excerpt from our RMCP certification course for resource management. But in a nutshell, when people ask us, why do people have, and what are the biggest obstacles to good staffing? Our most common response is simply you didn't build the right foundation to put yourself in a position to be able to do staffing in an efficient and effective way. And just-in-time resourcing, which represents the 6 elements that we teach in our certification course: skills inventory, who do you have and what are they capable of doing, a mechanism for how do you actually apply people to work, how do you assign people to work, a forecast, so you have some granular view of what my skills capacity needs are over hopefully a 6-month time horizon or longer, a gap analysis that drives sourcing and development, how many people do I need to hire, what skill sets, what training, retraining do I need to do, technology to automate those parts of the process, and of course, like any good process, governance. What am I going to measure? How am I going to measure it? What are my remediation processes when things aren't working as planned? So, in a nutshell, these things are all required in order to actually support a good staffing environment. So, if I just look at the left side of this page, is the ability to proactively and strategically match resources to the roles and work that needs to be done is a strategic outcome that every staffing mechanism really needs to be striving to accomplish, so that we're not doing triage, all the time on every project that we have. And so really, if your staffing mechanism is built right, 80+% of your staffing work gets done by the process on the right-hand side here, or those 6 elements, and the technology that supports and automates those processes. This is really our guest speaker will talk a little bit about this as well, is that this is a really data-driven environment, and you need data on both the demand and supply side. The demand side of the business, which would be your project plans. What do I have to assign people to work? What's the work that needs to get done? And hopefully a forecast that lets you look out over the next 4, 5, 6 months so that you can start the process of finding the human capital you need to do that work. As we all know, human capital doesn't materialize overnight, and training and retraining takes time. And then the skills inventory, which is your supply side. Who do you have? Where are they located? What do they do? When are they going to come available? What are their competencies? Those sorts of things are embodied in that. And so having that data all available, and then bringing that into an environment, a centralized staffing environment, and centralized staffing meaning we look across the enterprise for where we have the opportunity to assign people to work for the benefit of the enterprise, not for the benefit of a particular department. And that's an important distinction, is we see too much siloed activity in organizations where people are bottled up in particular silos. And what we want to do is centralized staffing, is create an environment where the best person and the most available person that fits the need of the job gets assigned to the work that needs to get done. So that's a really important part of that. And so when you do it that way, by the way, you avoid the departmental biases that might occur, people protecting their workers from being used by other departments as an example. And by the way, human biases. When we're assigning people to work, is when process and technology are involved, it takes some of the biases out of the process. So for those of you organizations with the DEI initiatives in your business, is a well-honed resource management system that lets process and technology assign people to work, removing the biases that might occur in our workplaces for whatever reasons that those might exist. Using techniques to identify solutions to overcome staffing challenges, and I added 3 words from what we would typically say, just not always triage, is that again, there should be a mechanism that when we have a shortage or somebody got sick or somebody quit the business or whatever happened, where I have a staffing challenge, or maybe it's a project I didn't expect to come in so soon comes in, is that these shouldn't always fall to the triage department to go fix. And we see this all the time. The resource management office gets hey, well, we got a project that just came in that requires 20 people. We didn't expect it. What do we do? And there should be a process that addresses that and handles that, because that's the nature of our project-based businesses. So a way to prioritize or reprioritize. How do you do repeat sourcing from where you find these people, and having fewer fire drills in your business, and have a process that solves for these. I'm not suggesting that triage goes away in these environments, but 80% plus of our staffing work should get done by the process and the technology, leaving our resource managers to help us fill the gaps where that just didn't work out for us. And then lastly is establishing policies to empower the RMO, to get to that point, which I make right at the very top of my slide around centralized staffing, is that really requires top-level support from your C-level in your organization to say, look, we do want the organization optimized at the organization level, not at a department level, because people are part of an enterprise and they're there for the benefit of the enterprise, not for the benefit of a particular department. So we want to use, we want to empower the RMO in a way that they're allowed to do what they need to do. And by the way, there's a lot into that, right? It's, where's that organization placed? Are they under the thumb of a particular department or organization that's going to bottle up resources, or are they free to not have to worry about organizational politics and those sorts of things, and act neutrally in how they assign people work, get past those silos, get past the my favorite person syndrome, and create an environment where we can freely go after the people that we need to do to staff our work. And again, I'll repeat again that for those of you that are focused on DEI initiatives, is the easiest way to remove bias from the workplace is let a process and technology work on who the best people are to assign to work. And it's pretty hard to argue when that occurs. So anyway, in a nutshell, build the right foundation, the stuff on the right, which we teach in just-in-time resourcing. And if you don't use our process, that's okay. But those 6 things you're going to need to do effective resource and workforce management in any environment. And those things all become foundational elements to the actual job of staffing our work. So those are just some insights from us, and those are things you can learn in RMCP school if you come to our certification program. I have the distinct privilege and pleasure today of introducing a guest speaker today. Her name is Christine Robinson, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about her background and the company that she works for. I would also add that we have an advisory board. We have the 12 members of our advisory board that represent different companies in professional services, consulting services, accounting firms, product development organizations, enterprise IT organizations, marketing agencies, and most recently law firms. And Christine comes from the accounting audit an advisory business of which Baker Tilly is a part. We're delighted to have her. And with that, Christine, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Randy, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm so excited to be here and really appreciative of the opportunity to engage with the RM community. It's certainly one of my favorite topics, and I'm very excited to share some of my perspectives and thoughts on staffing, one of the core pieces of what we do. I would say in terms of my background, I certainly won't reiterate exactly what's on the slide, but as Randy outlines, my experience in the RM space has been somewhat varied. I actually started at a Big Four organization in the accounting and advisory space, and really pivoted to both looking at a couple of different geographies, overseeing and developing some of those processes from an RM perspective, as well as looking at the audit side of the house, which is a little bit more linear, a bit more predictable. So having balance between the two, it's been a really phenomenal learning experience. And what I would say is that resource management is certainly an area that is really, really unique. I think it's one of the coolest jobs in the world. You get to interact with people, but you also have that operational lens. And again, very, very excited to be here and excited to dive into the topic.
Okay, let me see if I can get my my slide to go there. There you go.
Thank you. So I'll give a little bit of perspective on the organization that I'm with now, Baker Tilly. We are a top 10 CPA advisory firm. We've got about 6,500 team members based in cities across the country. We provide tax, assurance, consulting, and advisory services to our clients. And again, very excited to be here. Thank you for having me. As we get started, I would say I chose to start with this in terms of this concept of, are there really best practices in resource management? And I would say a resounding yes. I find that staffing is interestingly viewed as somewhat of an afterthought. Certainly as we think about the various different operational components that go into managing nearly any industry, it is interesting how when it gets to the staffing component, it sometimes falls by the wayside in terms of thinking about the actual process of staffing. So I'm excited to really dedicate some time to that here today. I would say that when you think about staffing in comparison to some of what we do more broadly at, I would say probably most of our organizations, and you compare it to other things such as the pursuit of work, right? If you think about the pursuit of work and the pursuit of opportunities, that is very much focused on, right? There are entire teams dedicated to business development and the strategy and thought process of that. So yes, of course, there are best practices when it comes to staffing, and they shouldn't be a best kept secret. These are things that we should share and we can learn from one another in the resource management community. I'll certainly delve into some of those in a bit, but here are a couple of foundational items that are important to think through before we get there, starting with the fact that resource management exists across many different businesses. And certainly some of them have more mature practices than others. And I would say here, by virtue of that alone, the degree to which best practices have been developed in various different organizations and industries, that is going to vary. So that's something that I think is important to think about. The accounting and consulting space has some of the more formalized approaches to resource management. From my perspective, I've worked for more years than I care to say in this particular space. And what I've noted over time is that given the billable nature of the work, coupled with, of course, the sheer size of some of these organizations, the approach to staffing is certainly more formal and in some cases more documented in these industries. So a lot of what I'll touch upon today is pulling from that industry and really more broadly, right, versus than from a specific firm. And the last to keep in mind is that I think this is, again, important. I'm certain that we have a variety of participants here today. Despite the nuances that certainly exist across industries and lines of service, the core best practices from a resource management perspective, they hold true. So that being said, I firmly believe that the majority of those staffing best practices, they're somewhat industry agnostic, given that at the end of the day, you're still dealing with the same key players in terms of people whose careers are influenced leaders who have a strategic vision on where they want to take the business, and of course the operational parts of the organization and the KPIs associated with them. And so we can move on to the next slide. In terms of what you'll need, right? So before we actually get into what are those best practices and how to use them, there's a few key items that you'll really need in order to implement any of them. And the first one being the understanding of the business that you're supporting. This is absolutely critical. You want to understand the leaders. You want to know where they want to take the business and how what you do in resource management can support that direction. Not only will that help you from a relationship perspective, clearly, but it is also going to position you in resource management to make the right recommendations on a day-to-day basis. You want the suggestions that you're making related to staffing to resonate with those leaders. You want to come prepared and show them that you actually understand their strategic vision and where they want to go, and you're coming to the table with ideas and real actionable suggestions for how to bring that to life, and that certainly goes a long way. Additionally, you'll want to dedicate time to educating yourself on the work that's being done, the clients that your organization serves, if that's the type of organization that you find yourself in, and of course the interplay between the two. I would say here as a note, you don't need deep technical training on these areas, but you do need to be able to speak intelligently about what's going on in the business. You need to understand what pieces are non-negotiable. You need to understand certainly if there are, and speaking from the accounting industry, if there are certain regulatory requirements that staffing can have an influence over. These are the types of things that I would certainly encourage you to really understand and make it a concerted effort to become familiar with those areas. The next is getting to know the people that you are staffing, emphasis on the word people. These are individuals who have career aspirations. Certainly they have their own strengths, right? They have things that they want to continue working on. And quite frankly, they have things that they like to work on. Becoming familiar with all of that is going to put you in a position as the resource manager to do a lot of really, really exciting things. You can then start to influence the trajectory of career paths. You can drive retention in your company. You can support leaders in an enhanced, more sophisticated way by understanding all of that. And again, at the end of the day, going back to the fact that resource management, it truly is industry agnostic. Generally speaking, leaders, they care about their people, right? They want to know how they can bring them into leadership roles, and having you support them in that vision is going to be important. And you can certainly do that through staffing. The last is data, right? So this one is somewhat self-explanatory. I would encourage you to really commit to understanding the metrics and the critical success factors of your organization so that you can better implement resource management processes that fit within the broader expectations coming from your leadership team. And now we can finally talk about the actual best practices and how to implement them. I'd also like to call your attention to the JITR wheel that we have displayed here on this slide. This, for anyone who is certified, will be familiar to you, and I would note really all of the items that I'll share call back to not only what Randy had shared, but also to the components outlined on here. So let's get started with the first one, which is creating availability when there is no availability. This one's my favorite and certainly inspired the title of this slide because I do think it is somewhat magical. I say here that this is one of the really interesting parts of the job in resource management, and quite frankly, one of the ones that I think leadership views as driving the most value when they're kind of stuck, right? And they're in that situation where they're looking to meet demand and we have to try to figure something out. And so what I would say here is, if you're a resource manager and your first and last stop in filling a staffing need is to look at what's available, I'd really encourage you to spend some time becoming more familiar with the areas I just covered, right? Doing that will help you understand that availability isn't a skill set. And that means that simply because someone is available, while certainly the timing is important, that alone does not make them a good fit for the project, nor does it make the project a good fit for them, right? Going back to the employee engagement component. And so that being said, in resource management, we find ourselves in this situation quite often where it's a peak time, we've got a number of demands, and the availability simply isn't there. So where does that leave us? that's where you can leverage the tools at your disposal and the knowledge that you've gleaned to really take a bird's eye view of the situation and begin scenario planning around how to free up the right person for the job. That can be through an assessment of skills. Perhaps it's the potential to give someone a great career opportunity, or maybe it's an assessment of the overall composition of the team that they're currently on to see if any movement is possible. So these are the different things that you can start to do. And again, having really established that relationship with the leaders that you work with is going to open the door for you to have those conversations and really bring some of these suggestions to the table. The next is the importance of conflict resolution. You know, I think it's interesting from a conflict resolution perspective. This isn't a topic that many people, at least outwardly or on the face, view as an important component of resource management, but it really is. There are so many areas in which we find ourselves navigating conversations really at all levels of the organization that we work. And so emphasis on that one is important, and really being able to be empathetic, understanding where all the different parties are coming from. That's going to be important in positioning you to facilitate those conversations, which really leads me then into a well-defined escalation process, right? Because the reality is that those conflicts do arise, and staffing and what we do in resource management is complex. In addition to being complicated, it's something that people care about deeply at all levels, whether they are the person working on the project or perhaps they're the leader who's going to market and thinking about the composition of the project team that they're bringing forth to the client. So sitting down with leadership to really plot out an escalation process before you get into those sticky situations, that's going to be very important. That's going to give you the framework that you can rely on as a resource manager. And I would really encourage you to think through how those various scenarios play out, what leaders want to be involved with, what they don't want to be involved with, and ultimately who that decision maker is based on the various different situations. That's going to allow you to be in a better position. The power of skills transferability, I touch upon this one, and Randy, you touched upon this one a bit earlier related to your comment around the skills inventory. And this is important not just in terms of the data that we have on hand, but also in terms of allowing the resource manager to connect the dots between perhaps what is being asked for and what someone brings to the table that is perhaps similar, right? I can think of countless scenarios in my world, you know, from a career perspective, where something is being asked for and I have something like that available, and that's really how you start to influence giving people those career opportunities and enhancing their own internal network within the organization. Leaders have really appreciated that in my experience as well. There are some differentiating factors that you can use as a guide. And again, leaning on your knowledge of the business, of the people, and of course, leveraging that data, that's going to help you to figure out what differentiates people. Again, going back to how do you create availability when there isn't availability? You know, sometimes it's easy to fall into that trap of, hey, no one's available. Well, they're not all in the same situation. And how can you bring to light some of those differentiating factors based on perhaps an opportunity that you know someone is seeking, or your knowledge of the strategic vision of the leader in that area to really bring some of those components to life and have a strategic conversation about where to go next. Using data for decision making, again, somewhat self-explanatory, but this goes back again to understanding the KPIs that are important to your organization, and it allows you to lean on those so you can really bring to life what they're trying to achieve and how resource management can help them get to those very specific parts of their vision that they're looking to bring to the table and move in that direction. Prioritizing demand. Getting closely connected with leadership has a number of benefits, of course, and this is one of the reasons. You'll take your cues in resource management from leadership in terms of how to prioritize the demand that's coming in. That's going to ensure that you're in resource management in lockstep with the strategy of the organization, but it also helps you in resource management to stay organized as well as to manage expectations with everyone that you're interacting with. Lastly, get creative. I've heard over time that it is more of an art than a science in resource management. So, you know, take that as you will, but what I'd leave you with is I can't overemphasize the importance of being creative in your approach to making recommendations. This is the way that you can really differentiate yourself as a resource manager. So hopefully that's helpful, truncated version of some of what we do in terms of best practices from a staffing perspective. I would encourage you to keep in touch. Please do, reach out via LinkedIn. I love to engage with the RM community. I would also love to share that I have a blog actually coming out in the new year that will center on resource management and how I actually implement a number of resource management principles in my life outside of work. So stay tuned for that, and I'll certainly share that on LinkedIn as well. Thank you, Randy. Back to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Christine. Every single one of those points that Christine shared are relevant across every single domain that we serve, whether you're in professional services, accounting, law firms, enterprise IT, and marketing agency, all applicable. So thank you for sharing your insights. I'm going to give you a quick commercial here, and then Christine and I'll take a couple of questions from the group. For those of you who haven't attended one of our global symposiums, we got another one coming up April 20th and 21st in Dallas, unlocking a world of resource management opportunities. We're going to have a great lineup of expert speakers. We're going to have a dozen or so companies there demonstrating resource management automation technology, and an opportunity to get to meet your industry peers and learn from the collective community at the Institute. We got early bird pricing available through February 15th. There are team discounts available, and RMCPs earn 10 PCUs for attending. Regarding the certification program, you're not familiar, it's the only one of its kind in the world where we provide professional skills development for resource managers. You get to learn best practices, you get access to a special resource center. You'll walk away with a copy of a commercial grade resource management process solution, and we've got literally hundreds of companies that have dedicated to training their resource managers through the RMCP program. The program itself is available in 3 different formats: 3-day classroom, 6-week, 2 hours a week for 6 weeks, or on demand, depending on what your learning availability and style is. And we teach just-in-time resourcing, which both Christine and I talked about briefly here earlier. And we do provide digital badges for completion in addition to your certification itself. You can go to the website anytime, and you can find information on our upcoming programs. So again, these are the various versions: in person, online, as well as, by the way, some of our next level training beyond certification. And again, the course is available on demand. I will mention our prices are going to be going up on January 1. We're working on what that's going to actually be. But these prices that are displayed are good through December 31st. So if you got some extra budget money to spend in 2022, would encourage you to think about buying some certification seats in advance, which we let you do a full year ahead of time. And but do it by December 31st if you want to lock in the best prices that are available. If you have any questions, you can send a note to info@resourcemanagementinstitute.com. We'll be happy to answer those questions. And before I get to our Q&A, just quickly again, we do have an intro course to RM that is a short subset of what we teach in the certification program. And there is next level of development. So once you get certified, we have a learning path for you as well. And you ought to check out our new soft skills course for resource managers. I do want to thank again Katana, Projector, and Savion for helping us. Their support of these webcasts is really, really important. And I'm going to grab a couple of quick questions. Christine, a question for you. What's the best way to train on staffing strategies and workforce management?
It's a great question. I would say that there's 2 probably main components. One is, of course, that real life scenario and being in the organization, having someone who is a manager level resource management really take the time to invest in taking the new resource manager through from start to finish, how they engage with leadership to solve a problem, how they scenario planned and did all of that is going to be important. And I would also say, Randy, not to repeat what you just went through, but certainly the RMI offers a number of really great mechanisms as well, and different techniques and courses that I know I have certainly leveraged myself.
Wonderful. So, curious, when you receive pushback, as many of our members do sometimes in their enterprises, as they have competing priorities, when you get pushback from the business and implementing some of the things you're doing, how do you overcome that?
Well, that could be another power up session in itself. I think what I would say just kind of generally is again, it's that relationship with leadership. Establishing that up front is really going to mitigate the risk of having that get blown out of proportion, and really understanding and making sure that everyone's on the same page, that you can manage those expectations up front. That's going to help you so that those situations arise fewer and further between.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I'm sorry, we don't have any more time for more questions. If you have any questions left in the panel, we'll try to get to them or send them to folks afterwards. Thomas, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Appreciate you sharing the RMI perspectives, and Christine, really appreciate your time today as well, sharing perspectives from Baker Tilly. I want to thank you all for joining us for our last Power Up webcast of the year. We did record the webcast, so we'll be getting that out to folks as well later this afternoon. And I think the next time we have the chance to get together as a community will be our state of resource management. That address is scheduled for early February 7th. It'll be a webinar as well. So be on the lookout on our website and certainly in your inbox for our information on the state of resource management early next year. And join us for that. We'd love it. And with that, I'll end today's webcast. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.